Hello, everyone. I'm Blake Milteer, curator of the MacKinnon Collection for the National Galleries of Scotland and the National Library of Scotland. And welcome, everyone. I know some of you will be familiar with the MacKinnon Collection and others not. So let's start with just a little background here. The MacKinnon Collection is an unparalleled collection of historic photographs amassed by one man, Murray MacKinnon of Aberdeen, over more than 4 decades. MacKinnon's collecting focus was Scottish life, identity, and achievement from the 1840s through to the early 1950s. The MacKinnon Collection includes more than 14,000 individual photographs in total and was one of the last collections of historic Scottish photography of this quality and depth in private hands. In 2013, MacKinnon sold the collection on to another collector in England, and in 2018, the collection was jointly purchased in full by the National Library of Scotland and the National Galleries of Scotland with support from the National Lottery Heritage Fund, the Scottish Government, and Art Fund, saving this stunning resource for the nation. The National Lottery funds in particular covered part of the purchase and also a 3-year project which included the hire of a curator, me, who would oversee cataloging of the collection, which establishes the core records that will be referenced and built upon over time. And this image is part of our wonderful core of volunteers working with me at the Scottish National Portrait Gallery on cataloging the collection. Included digitisation of the entire collection, so here we have a couple more volunteers working on cataloging, which is immediately followed by the digitisation happening there in the background. And digitisation, of course, will provide the visual records that allow for online and other kinds of programs over time. It included 2 exhibitions, which we launched here in Edinburgh in late 2019 and carried on into early 2020. That's Scotland's Photograph Album at the Scottish National Portrait Gallery, which was a survey of the themes, photographers, and different kinds of photographs in the collection. And it included about 230 photographs from the MacKinnon Collection, and at the National Library at the water's edge, focused on the theme of Scotland's coasts and waters in alignment with Scotland's year of coasts and waters. The 3-year project also includes a tour of a selection of photographs from the launch exhibitions here in Edinburgh, and we selected venues across 3 regions in Scotland. We're working with Kirkcudbright Art Gallery, where the exhibition will open next month, Museum Nan Elan in Stornoway, and Duff House in Banff. And all of these exhibitions and the tour are accompanied by a vigorous public engagement program of talks, tours, etc. You see a couple examples here in which we brought out some of the actual prints for folks to experience in close contact at the Portrait Gallery, and the talk that I did with BBC presenter Crawford, that is. We're continuing with online activities since lockdown, and we aren't able to hold public events as we were, including the National Library's Shore to Shore web activity that features 75 images from the MacKinnon Collection geo-referenced on 3 different maps of Scotland. It includes archive films from the collections related to subjects in the photographs. It includes current film interviews with fishermen in coastal communities. And you can also see select then and now photographs from the collection on the website. And at the National Galleries, we have online collections and features that include over 300 photographs from the MacKinnon Collection online that you can zoom right into and see great detail in the photographs. We've done 10 different blogs providing insight into various subjects in the collection, and the latest of those blogs introduces our ongoing social media project, in which public knowledge, your knowledge, is helping us identify unknown subjects in these historic photographs. And we started with this one, John D. Stevens' Dawn of Light and Liberty. And when we received this photograph from the early 20th century, it only had the title and the artist's signature inscribed on the mount, and a date of 1920s had been assigned to it. And when I first met Murray MacKinnon about a year ago, he told me not only this was his favorite photograph in the collection, which was great to hear, but that it had also been taken in Aberdeen, near to where he lived. So that provided me the first bit of important context in interpreting this provocative image. I then went to Aberdeen and located the sculpture, still installed along Rosemount Viaduct. It had been erected in 1888, which provides us the earliest possible date for the photograph. And as the photograph was exhibited at the Portrait Gallery and also featured online, people from national scholars to local residents responded with further significant information, including a 1917 obituary for the artist. And we didn't have the artist's dates prior to that. So this obituary also stated that, that John D. Stevens had died in the front in the First World War. And a local newspaper reference from 1908 was also provided, indicating the photograph had been exhibited earlier that year. So that provided us a much more specific date than 1920s for the photograph. So it improved our records, essentially. As we cataloged more of the collection, earlier photographs, here's the my photograph of this statue now on Rosemount Viaduct in Aberdeen. And as we dug deeper into the collection, we found two other photographs of this statue, in these instances by James Valentine and George Washington Wilson, providing further richness to this particular subject, but also giving us photographs made much closer to the date that the sculpture itself was made. Another photograph that's attracted great interest on social media by both residents of Buckie, in this case, and railroad enthusiasts, is this image of an unidentified group of fishwives from Buckie from about 1906. And some of the communication we've had, in particular on Facebook, has articulated that the fishwives would travel inland on the Highland Line, sell their fish. So it opens up the story a bit for us, and provided this image. One of the users on Facebook provided this image from a booklet on the Highland Line, which includes at least one of the same fishwives that's in the MacKinnon image. Users also informed us that the station shut in 1915, and this provides a definitive late date for the photograph. After some lively discourse on Facebook, a user positively identified this location as being in Wales rather than Scotland, so that was quite useful. And this wonderful image with women walking along a path with their creels also received some positive attention on Facebook, in which a keen-eyed local resident identified this landscape as the path from Privet Gardens town east of Banff. So now we have a location identified here. Now, this kind of feedback activity will of course continue, especially as we get all 14,000 photographs online, probably sometime next year. But at this time, we're also beginning to look more deeply at ways in which the MacKinnon collection plugs into the existing collections at both the National Library of Scotland and the National Galleries of Scotland, including instances in which MacKinnon photographs complement or deepen aspects of the existing collections, examples of work that fills gaps in the collections, and of course work that opens up new avenues for collecting in the future. And so with that, we can start by looking perhaps at some of the early photographs in the MacKinnon collection. And this is a daguerreotype, and daguerreotypes were first patented. They were the first patented photographic process in 1839. And this is one from the 1850s by Edinburgh-based photographers Ross and Thompson, who were best known for their daguerreotype portraits. And this is a particularly rare example. In the MacKinnon collection, we have multiple daguerreotypes with different poses by the same young couple, both together and individually. And this is rare because of the expense of daguerreotypes at the time and the laboriousness of the process. Now, in both collections, we have many examples of early processes and images from the first 2 decades of photography. And of particular note, in the National Library's collection, there's a photograph called Paris Rooftops by Paul Gustave Froment, dated 1935, which would place it a few years before photography via daguerreotypes were announced to the world. So that gives a little further context to the earliest photographs in the MacKinnon collection. Also in NLS's collection, we have an album produced by the Edinburgh Calotype Club, which is one of the first organized photographic clubs in the world. And the library holds volume 1, volume 2 is at Edinburgh's central libraries. And the second form of photography, also patented in 1839, was William Henry Fox Talbot's process that came to be known as the calotype, in which a paper negative was made, allowing creation of numerous prints. And this negative to positive process, using different materials over time, of course, has been photography's most enduring form. This image is one of 4 Talbot images in the MacKinnon collection, and specifically this image of Loch Katrine was among 23 originally that Talbot made in Scotland, inspired by Sir Walter Scott's writings and life. Significantly, this photograph appeared in a volume called Sun Pictures in Scotland that Talbot produced in 1845. And this is cited as the first photographically illustrated book to be offered for sale. And only about 20 complete copies of this volume still exist, one of which is at the National Libraries of Scotland. But for the National Galleries, the Talbot photographs in the MacKinnon collection are in fact the first examples of Talbot's work in the collections, or his original prints, that is. There are more than 80 photographs in the MacKinnon collection by Scotland's most significant historic photographers, David Octavius Hill and Robert Adamson. And this includes salted paper prints, later carbon prints, and one original calotype negative. The National Galleries of Scotland, of course, has the world's largest collection of Hill and Adamson photographs, and really is the sort of go-to source for scholars, as well as anyone who wants to look at the photographs in person via exhibition or in the print room at the Portrait Gallery. And NLS has a significant 2-volume set called the Series of Calotypes that was made by Hill for presentation to a London publisher in 1848, just the year after Adamson's untimely passing. Both collections include many photographs related to the Crimean War, which occurred between 1853 and 1856, and feature photographs by James Robertson, wonderful panoramic photographs of battle sites in both collections. NLS has a William Simpson album, an album dedicated to the artist and made in probably collaboration with the artist William Simpson, who participated as a soldier in that war, and also includes photographs by other significant photographers. National Galleries has a series of Joseph Kundal photographs, primarily of soldiers after the war, but neither collection includes any taken during the war by its most renowned photographer, Roger Fenton, who you see represented by an image here on the left, whose images are cited as the first war reportage. We do have Fenton photographs in both collections, but they're primarily British-oriented studio and landscape images. So these important Crimean War photographs are a first for both organizations. Julia Margaret Cameron, not just one of the earliest women photographers to see recognition for her work in her own time, but to this day, one of the most important photographers ever. And along with photographic artists like Helen Adamson, Cameron showed very early on that photography was much more than just a documentary medium. And this image of Hattie Campbell, who appeared in multiple images by Cameron, shows up in the MacKinnon Collection in the Fairley Family album made between the 1860s and 1880s, dedicated to the Fairley family of Ayr, who in our research we found Miss Campbell married into. But this album is also pretty unique and joins the collection at NLS with a volume of photogravures by Cameron, nearly 30 Cameron photographs at the National Galleries, and photographic albums of various kinds in the collections of both organizations. Part of the uniqueness of the Fairley Family album, in addition to its inclusion of a Cameron photograph, are the wonderful collages, which include both drawing and photographic elements throughout the album. There's nothing else quite like it in either collection, and it's been while the exhibition at the Portrait Gallery was open, it was a very popular component of that exhibition. Thomas Annan's Streets and Closes of Old Glasgow from 1868 to 1871. This is one of the earliest instances of what came to be known later as social documentary photography, in which Annan significantly included the impoverished residents of central Glasgow in these images that were taken prior to many of these buildings being demolished. So the MacKinnon Collection offers us the opportunity, through its deep content in Annan's work, to experience side by side some of the early albumen prints from this body of work, as well as the 1878-1879 carbon print volume that was made, and the 1900 edition, in which the same images are presented via photogravures. So we not only have the opportunity to see these different photographic processes side by side, and the latter two being sort of combination between photographic and printmaking processes, but also get to see the evolution of photography as it became possible or more readily available to utilize photographs in publishing. So this kind of social history is really the connecting point between the collections at the National Library of Scotland and the National Galleries of Scotland, as both have articulated intent to emphasize Scottish culture here at home, as well as Scotland's international conversance. And Murray MacKinnon himself has said that he continually strengthened the collection while he was building it by, quote, always looking. And that would include both outward for new images and quality images, as well as inward for deeper historical narratives. And that, of course, must be our enduring practice as we continue to care for this collection and interpret it over time. And here you get a sense of the scope of images in the collection, each with its own qualities, each with its own histories and connectivity to other aspects of Scottish and international history. And so I think that's a good place for us to end here, but keep going by always looking